The Bible has often been said that it's God's love story for us, and that's very true. From Genesis clear through Revelation, we see how God has always been with his people, how he loves his people, ultimately how he died for his people and resurrected from the dead. But every once in a while, when you're going through and you read these certain passages, there's certain passages of Scripture that really get your attention. And they just really kind of take you to another place. And some of those passages of Scripture we read is where Jesus feeds 5,000 people, well, more than 5,000 people, with just some fish and a couple loaves of bread. Maybe where he walks on water. Maybe where he resurrects from the dead. Maybe when he was with Daniel while he was in the lion's den. But the passage we're going to look at today is not one that's talked about very often as being one of those powerful, awe-inspiring passages of Scripture. But I think as we go through this, you will see how powerful this portion of Scripture really is. And we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. And it says, "Soon afterward, he was on his way to a town called Nain. His disciples and a large crowd were traveling with him. Just as he neared the gate of the town, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was also with her. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said, 'Don't cry.' Then he came up and touched the open coffin, and the pallbearers stopped. And he said, 'Young man, I tell you, get up.' The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. The fear came over everyone, and they glorified God, saying, 'A great prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people.' This report about him went throughout all Judea and all the vicinity." The story of the centurion that we looked at last week, the man had great faith. And Jesus even commented on that. He said, "Not such great faith have I even seen in all of Israel." Jesus speaks a word, and from a distance, this man's slave was healed. The centurion faith amazes Jesus that he just was shocked at the amount of faith that this man had. But as much as this passage here, we probably more identify with this woman. Oftentimes, our faith isn't as strong as what it should be. Oftentimes, we allow Satan to cause doubts and fear and distract us. And we allow Satan to get that foothold in our lives, even though we know what Satan is up to, even though we know what Satan is trying to do to get us to slip up, to try to get us to trip up. I hope I'm not the only one in this building today that has ever allowed Satan to do that to me. I think if we're honest, we've all been in the place of this woman, more so than we have been in the place of that centurion. I think we've all questioned our faith and questioned our beliefs, and I'm sure we all at one point have questioned, is God really doing what is best for me? Is God really hearing my prayers? Is God really listening to me? Some of us know the deep pain of having to bury a loved one, maybe a son, maybe a mother, maybe a father, maybe a grandmother. I think we know the pain and the anguish that causes in our hearts. And, beyond that is where sometimes we find ourselves living in this world where we feel lonely even though we're surrounded by many people. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said something that just kind of shocked me. And they said, and this person had, a good family. And he said, sometimes, even though I have all of these people around me, I've got a wife, I've got friends, I've got kids. He said, sometimes even though I'm in the middle of all of these things going on, I still have a sense of loneliness deep inside of my heart. I'm going to tell you, that was something that almost brought me to tears when I heard him say that. Sometimes you can be in a room